The plagues are upon us. Why does God have to be so vengeful? Hey, Rabbi. Oh, you're so tall.
I don't know why I'm so tall.
You're
How
so
about
tall.
that?
How you doing?
I can step back, and then I won't be so tall. Just keep
Good to
going
see you.
back.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Uh,
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, except for the plagues. We're in the midst of the plagues in the Torah reading, and the question that I struggle with every single year is back. How is it that we can believe in a way in which God is involved in our lives, in a God who would not only bring plagues down upon the Egyptians, but harden Pharaoh's heart? Right? There was an out. There was a maybe a chance that Pharaoh was going to change his mind, and God's like, nah, you know what? I'm not done. I'm not done. How do we make sense of that kind of a God? How do we believe in that with modern sensibilities? Oh, God, help me, please.
So, oh God, help you.
Yeah.
You're calling
Oh,
God vengeful,
Rabbi.
and now you expect that God's going
Oh,
to help you?
oh,
Huh?
Rabbi, help me.
All right. Well, look, critics of Judaism often argue that the God of the Old Testament, and I am using that term, specifically, all right, the God of Judaism is a vengeful God, a God that almost seems like God enjoys wreaking havoc and destruction. And we have lots of examples of that, right? I mean, you name the 10 plagues. Of course, they pose a problem for us, but there are other examples. We've got the people being destroyed after creating the golden calf. You've got Moses not being allowed to enter. This is the one that I struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not being allowed to enter the land after striking the rock. Right? That seems like a fairly minor thing and a fairly major punishment. Right? So I think we could dance around. We could jump through hoops, right? And we could redo our thinking. But I'm gonna suggest something else. So go ahead. All right, you got.
I want to dance. I want to jump through a hoop first.
Okay,
I'm
fine.
just saying. This is like prolonging the satisfaction. Okay, so the Moses thing. Let me just say about the Moses thing that my take on the Moses thing is that people mistake what his crime or mistake was. It wasn't hitting the rock. It was not giving God the credit for causing the water to come out. It was making it seem like he was actually bringing it out, which, if you're God, I can understand how that would be a pretty big deal. But I just want to share one little teaching about the plagues that I shared with you earlier, and it's really, I don't know, it's something that's always stuck with me. So in the text, a number of times when it's talking about God hardening Pharaoh's heart, the text will say va'ani, and I, comma, akshe et lev paro, and I, or achazek, and I, comma, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. So I don't remember the name of this teacher, forgive me, but B'Shem Omro, I should know his name, says that there's an extra I in there, right? There's an extra that it doesn't need to say, and I, comma, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. That in fact, what that I is the subject of the sentence. That God isn't the subject. It's not God who's hardening Pharaoh's heart. It's the I-ness, the ego of Pharaoh who is hardening his own heart. And as a proof text for that, he talks about, as a proof text that you can look at when he says, when the plagues are full force, what does he say to Moshe when he's almost breaking down? He doesn't say, take these plagues away from us. He says, take these plagues away from me. Take these plagues away from me.
Mm-hmm.
The Pharaoh is so self-absorbed that it isn't God who's hardening his heart. It's Pharaoh who's hardening his heart. And the last little sort of piece of text for this is when God and Moshe, when God and Moses are on Mount, what mount, is it Horeb? Is that where they are? When with the sheep and when he first calls, is it it's Horeb, I think.
Well, it's Sinai. Yes, it's called
Sinai, Horeb.
Torah,
So
but
yeah, sorry,
it is it's
I blanked for a
defined as
second.
being Sinai.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So when they're up there,
we're
God
gonna
says the reason that God says, I'm going to send you is God says, Vigam shamati et za'akatam, and I have also heard their cries. Which begs the question also, well, who other than you, God, has heard their cries? No one else is doing anything about it. And the answer given is that Gam refers to the Israelites. They have not only been crying themselves, but they've been able to hear each other's cries. So there is a sort of a dichotomy set up here, right? The Israelites, how am I dancing? Is this good? The Israelites hear each other, are not self-absorbed. Pharaoh, ego, totally self-absorbed. It wasn't God who was vengeful. It was Pharaoh. Go.
fine. Okay. And we can look. I can dance too. I can talk about the plagues being this is really a war of the gods. Okay, right. The Egyptian gods. All right. When you what's the big Egyptian god? The sun god. So when we have darkness, that's against the sun god. Okay? Nile was considered a god in and of itself. It was the life force of Egypt. Okay? So when you make it blood, then it's against that. We can do all of that dancing, okay? But it still leaves us, okay, with a feeling that God is vengeful. Now, I will say that it is problematic, okay, to see God as vengeful, because I think that can actually metastasize into anti-Semitism. That if God is vengeful, then the God of the Jews, the Jewish people, are vengeful. And Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, alav hashalom, said one of the most tragic moments in Western civilization came when the Christians began distinguishing between what they called the Old Testament God of vengeance as opposed to the New Testament God of love. Okay? And Rabbi Sacks goes on to say that's not a small error, okay, that a lot of Jews have lost their lives because of that distinction. And now I think that is problematic, because the Old Testament God of vengeance, the Jewish God, and the New Testament God of love happens to be the same God. And that actually leads me to the point that I want to make when it comes to this idea of God being vengeful. Okay? I'm going to say, yes, God is vengeful. And I'm okay with that. Okay? We think about God as only being a God, or we want God to be only a God of love. Okay? And that's a very Christian idea. But I would actually prefer to have a God who may not be defined as vengeful. Vengeful has a sense of it not being warranted. I'm just going to slay these people because I'm having a bad day. I do think that God has a bad day. Okay? God can have bad days. Okay? But God, okay, when we think about God, when we look at what we speak about God and how we use the names of God, okay, different names have different attributes attached to them. And we have names of God that are attached to what we would call in Hebrew din, okay? That would be judgment, okay? And we have names of God that would be attached to God's attribute of rachamim, of compassion. God is both of those. God can act in a vengeful, we might think of it as vengeful, but maybe we need to think about it as God is exerting judgment. And if we look at, hey, destroying the people after the golden calf, well, they're getting punished because they did something wrong. Moses, albeit in our own cultural bias, we think about that sin of striking the rock, or not speaking to the rock, or not giving God credit as being pretty mild, okay? But it was something that was wrong. And so God punishes, okay? And the plagues, no surprise, okay? Punishment 2. Okay? What is wrong with seeing a God, right, who punishes? Now, I think that I'm going to just say one other thing, and that is that a God of punishment, if that's all we see, then we're missing out as well. Because that deen, that judgment or vengeance, is balanced by rachamim. And there's a whole lot.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot. There's a massive amount of chesed, a massive amount of God's loving kindness, okay, that is shown throughout the Torah and throughout the Bible.
I think,
in fact, God's chesed lasts longer than God's vengeance.
Absolutely. I think the problem may be, though, that when something bad happens, our default is that, why did God do this to me, her, him? Right? Why? For some reason, we default to, this is God punishing us. So how do you square the idea that, yes, God can be vengeful, God can be focused on justice, and the lived experience of people who see people suffering who don't deserve that justice or that deen?
Because I don't need to see it as God's justice. Okay? I don't need to see a young person who dies, right, as purely, right, God pulling the strings. In fact, I don't want to see that. Right? God has given us free will. Right? If God is in total control, then I have to give it over to God completely. Right? Then whatever I'm doing is simply, right, what God wants me to do anyways. And when I do something wrong and I look to God and I say, what, you made me do this? That doesn't square with me. I believe in a God, right, that has the capacity to punish and, by the way, reward. Okay? But right, every time something bad happens, does not have to be attributed to God. And by the way, everything that was good that happened, do I have to say that this was God as well?
Okay. On a philosophical level, that makes perfect sense. On a lived level, I think, who gets to decide? Right? Who is the arbiter of when what happens in the world is God's vengeance and when what happens in the world is chance? And so now I'll just stick with those two. Right? Who gets to make those decisions? Is it each person does it?
Do we have to make those decisions?
I do. As a person who sees pain in the world, I need to. I need to know.
You need to know whether that's God doing it or not.
Yeah, because if I'm going to pray to God, if I'm going to talk to God,
what if we default to the fact that it's not God?
Say again?
What if we default to the fact that it's not God?
So that, fine, but that sort of flies in the face of this week's Parsha. And in fact, I would argue the Torah writ large.
Okay, and by the way, so is sacrifice. That flies in the face of what we do, all right? And so is slavery or indentured servitude. Okay, right. Yeah. because I don't have to look at the Torah and say everything in there has to match up with what we do today. That we have evolved, and God has evolved. Okay? God regrets when God does things. God changes God's mind. Okay? And so why is that any different? Right?
So could you suggest, given what you just said, that God learns, that God has grown up, right? That the God of the Bible is sort of the teenage, pissed off,
Yep. Fly off the
emotional, what?
handball.
Right, right.
Okay.
But God has grown and matured since then.
Yep.
Really?
Why not?
Because this is God.
Okay.
God grows like us. God,
What? Why is that? Hang on one second.
isn't God perfect?
Well,
Isn't
if God was perfect, okay, then we wouldn't have had the flood.
No, that's not true. I disagree with that completely. God absolutely intended to have the flood. That was a necessary part of creation.
Really, that wasn't all the people were sinning, and therefore
No,
God
they were.
wanted to wipe
Yes,
out
but
the
God
world.
knew they were going to sin, and God planned it that way.
Oh man, forget it. No way.
Yeah.
I don't.
And
No.
yes, I'm also one of those, God put the dinosaurs there for us to find the fossils. Not really. But yeah, I do believe that. God is I would never suggest that God is not perfect. What I could suggest is that perfection is in growth. Is that to be perfect, one has to be in process. Perfection
have to
is
be
not a
perfect?
destination. Sorry?
Do I have to be perfect?
We have to strive to
Can I
be.
be perfect?
No. But that's the
No.
difference. Right, but okay.
God created me.
Yes, but it says Kadoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, okay.
I got a good one for
Teaching
you here.
Yeah,
You ready?
I taught this last night.
Wait, but did you
At
teach this?
Antioch.
How is
Yeah.
Kidoshim spelled? And how is Kadosh spelled? Kidoshim tihiyu, you, people, us, is spelled
It's
Kuf
chaser.
Dalad Shin. It's chaser. It's
Chaser.
missing the Vav, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Ki Kadosh Ani, whereas I am holy, is spelled Malay. It's full. It's got the Vav. We can never reach the holiness, the perfection of God. But that
Maimonides
doesn't
teaches
mean we don't try.
Oh, correct. Okay, but God created us, okay, and we make mistakes. Okay?
But God doesn't. I think I won. I think I just
No,
won.
you didn't.
No.
You and I can disagree on this. All right, I can't. I have a hard time believing, okay, in a God that set up that a flood, right? That God necessarily created us, okay, flawed, expecting and awaiting and planned for us to be flawed, so that God could then go ahead um, and destroy us.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that God planned to destroy us. I think now that I'm thinking back on what I said, that's probably what I said. But that's not what I meant. What I meant is God absolutely created us flawed. God had to create us flawed.
Yes,
That's the
correct.
only way to create humanity. But God knows that we're flawed. God knows we're going to mess things up. And so, yeah, God is fully prepared to do those things. And by the nature of God knowing, they are a part of the plan. Let me ask you this. This vengefulness, the plagues or Moses, are those mistakes on God's part, or are those Deen?
I think it's Dean.
You think it's Deen?
I think it is judgment. Okay? We make those mistakes. We don't do what God expects of us, and therefore, God has the ability to punish us.
Right. And so then the distinction between when someone falls ill, God forbid, or dies, God forbid, the question is not, why did God do this to this person? In fact, maybe it's not even a question at all. It's, having the faith and the courage to recognize that not everything falls into that category of deen. Not everything that happens in the world. Everything may happen because of God. That's where I would land, at least. Everything happens because of God, but not everything. As you said before, there's a lot more rachamim in the world than there is deen.
Correct.
And so why? So maybe this is more of a sociological question. Why do we default to why is God punishing me?
Okay, I'll tell you where I think the answer is that we see God in ourselves. I know that that's kind of a flip. Normally we say we see ourselves, we see God and then we see ourselves. God and human beings both have a Yetzer Hara.
Oh, come on. Really?
Why? Why is it so hard? The Kabbalists.
You know that we're putting. Is this on?
The Sphere is this on?
Do you know we're on YouTube? This is gonna be out there forever.
Yeah.
That's it. So tell me more about that. How
you're 100 yards away. If God's going to strike me down, then I think you'll do all right. Okay. I think that the Kabbalists who really tried to understand God's attributes, they create this whole map of this. I don't know what happened either, but
that was strange. I apologize.
That was God.
Yeah, that was God. Yeah. Sorry.
God.
Go ahead.
Okay. The Kabbalists create this map of the Sphirot, of these virtues of God, right? All of these positive aspects, but the Kabbalists also map out negative aspects of God, and I think that there is something very powerful and very enriching in a fuller understanding of God, right? That God has bad days, okay? And when we see it in ourselves, right, we hold ourselves up and we want us to be better, okay? And we don't like it when we have days when our baser selves show more prominently, okay? But maybe we can be a little bit more forgiving of God if we recognize, okay, that just like us, God has both of those. Right? The God of Judaism is not all hellfire and brimstone. Okay? We're clear on that. The Jewish God is one of very firm deen, okay, of that justice, okay, and at the same time some tender rachamim, right, some mercy, and we who are created in God's image, okay, we human beings can be the exact same. Right? We need both of those. Okay? We don't want I don't want a God. Okay, I think holiness, I think godly behavior demands not only justice and not only compassion, okay, but both. Justice without compassion can be unbelievably cruel. Okay? Compassion without justice, okay? Think about this. Compassion without justice can tolerate evil and also cruelty. Okay? Only when we have both, all right, can we hope for the best.
That's really nice. I feel a little better.
Well, I'm glad. Okay, because I don't have to look at the plagues and say, God, I don't, not God, I don't love my God because I can't deal with people suffering, specifically because of God.
Right.
When I punish my children, there was a reason for that. Right? I'll say they deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That didn't mean that I wasn't pained by it. Right?
Right.
But if they deserved some sort of punishment and I was like, oh, everything's okay, I'm only compassionate to them, purely compassionate to them, okay, then what happens? Then they learn to do nothing else. Right? They can do whatever they want. We need
It's all about that. It's all about the
vengeful.
balance. That's what it
We
comes down
can't
to.
think about vengeance as being willy-nilly. That's where I think we get stuck.
Yeah.
Okay, that if God is a capricious God, then we struggle.
Yeah.
If we see God, right, as one who is responsible, right, and therefore judges us, and sometimes when we fall down, God has to punish us, okay, then that's a God that I can love.
Yeah.
And that's a God that I know loves me.
Mm.
How do my children know that I love them? Because I've set limits for them. Because if I didn't care,
Right.
they could do whatever they want.
Right. Shkayach. That was really beautiful. That was really, really beautiful.
I got to tell you, this was not a topic that I was necessarily looking forward to, but
this.
Thank you for pushing me to think about it.
It's so good. It's so rich, and what you shared was so beautiful. Anything exciting coming up this weekend that we should know about?
Rebecca Bronstein's becoming a bat mitzvah, but
Rebecca.
But other than that,
she brought donuts to JPAL
a regular Shabbat. So.
Did you get a donut? She brought donuts to JPAL last week.
I did not get a donut.
You need
which
to talk
is probably
to Rebecca
fine,
but yes. All right, thank you, sir. I'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you later.
See you later.